It's a red pen. I'm going to correct things.
There you go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 4 of Brews and Tunes, sponsored by Zaftig Brewing Company. My name is Corey Black. I am the host of this podcast show thing. Also help lead the band The Brewtet at the jam sessions on Thursdays at Zaftig, which are currently not happening, obviously, with the crazy world we live in. And tonight, I am beyond excited to dive into a topic that you may or may not have thought of, but myself and our guests tonight definitely have. So let me introduce them. Tonight, we have with us my coworker and really, really good friend. So happy that he is with us, Jacob Reed. How's it going, Jacob?
Hey, everybody. It's going pretty well.
Yay!
Glad
Jacob,
to be here.
I have wanted to talk to you forever, and this is our chance to actually talk to the masses of people. So it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. And also along with us is the great Jay Miglia. Jay Miglia, the great. And he's back with us, as you see, Jay and May, which is fantastic. We're excited about that. And Jay, how you doing tonight?
Very well. Thank you for inviting me on, Corey.
Yay!
Appreciate it.
Hey, I like the haircut you got going on there. Did you you rock this yourself?
I did, sir.
Man, I need to learn.
I used to knock it down like this when I was in college to try to save $1.
That's smart.
And I just happened to save the clippers, and they worked. Magically, they worked.
That's fantastic. So instead of doing jam sessions, you're just going to do haircutting at your place, right? That's how it works?
Yeah, right.
That's good. Jacob and I need a
self-serve thing, right? So I'm getting in trouble. It's self-serve. I'll just give you the clippers.
I love it. You could leave the tip or not a tip at all. Just use the clippers. Well, I think Jacob and I both could benefit from that someday, but it's fine. I'm going to let it flow and flow and flow. And anyhow.
Mine just goes straight out, so I couldn't deal if it just goes.
That's like my beard hair. I don't know if Jacob got to see it a lot. It was
something fierce.
It was pretty gross. Yeah.
A shrub. Yeah.
You know, it's really bad when you get to the point where you can't use the normal like beard clippers to get rid of it. You have to pull out the scissors. And then like for me, it's like PTSD, because any of you know me cutting things, fruits. Anyways, all right.
With points.
Anyways, we are so happy you're with us tonight, guys. Like I said, this show will be all about the souls of instruments, or instruments and what they mean to musicians. I think it's a really interesting topic that maybe hasn't been explored to the point that I would like to explore, which is obviously why we're talking about it tonight. But before we dive into any of that, it is time for us to do our brew of the week. Tonight, I am excited, as always, repping the Zaftig. Tonight, I've got the Razzie Galore, which if you have not had yet, it is a relatively new addition to the Zaftig fleet of beers. It is fantastic. It's got hints of raspberry and chocolate. It is a stout. It is amazing. I love it. Delicious.
That sounds good.
It is amazing. I agree. Perfect for a Cinco de Mayo. Or in my case, if you may have had a margarita before the great show, should be a lot of fun. So, yeah. What are you guys drinking? Jacob, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking my favorite beer in the world. Obviously, they're different beers for different times, but my go-to favorite is Bell's Two Hearted.
Hey.
It's kind of like an original craft brew. It's an American IPA, old school style, and it is really creamy and the right kind of bitter with all the yummy hops, and I love it.
I'm a huge fan of that one. We exchanged earlier through the cheers, exactly. We talked about earlier, there's a great recipe from Bell's for their beer cheese. And it is amazing, and it uses the Two Hearted Ale, and it is so good. So that was a good choice. All right, Jay, what are you drinking tonight?
That's like the best one they make. The Oberon comes out about this time of year too, and Oberon's real nice if you like wheats. But
I love Oberon.
The Two Hearted is nice. It's IPA night apparently, so I'm also repping for Zaftig tonight. I got the Juicy Lucy. I got Wylands is right down the street. I can get a steady stream of Juicy Lucy there. So
that is a great place to get beer. Not that I know great places to get beer, but
and I'm drinking it out of my commemorative Zaftig snifter as well. So
look at you. You're like
I might even hold it like this at some point. the European grip.
Wow, that's fantastic. Jay, I don't know if you had a chance yet, and when it's safe, you have to do this. They came out with a Super Lucy that uses passion fruit and orange and guava, and it is amazing. So you get a chance to go there. You got to try it. Yeah, it's incredible.
I love this stuff. It's like the right amount of hoppiness. Sometimes you have sometimes you get an IPA and it's like you got like a car air freshener in your mouth. It's a little too much hop thing going on. There's a little too much of the aromatics and stuff, and it's just like it blows everything up. It's a great balance. But I'll try the new one too. I'm down for trying anything from Zaftig.
I love that, the car air freshener, man. That's Zaftig. If you're listening, your next beer, car air freshener, ladies and gentlemen. Accompanied by black ice and a little Christmas tree on the bottle. It'll be great. Well, folks, tonight we, like I said, are really excited to dive into this topic. This whole show works like a discussion-based show where we just talk to each other like we would in a normal world. The reality is most of you listen to this through podcasting, and we love that. So make sure you like and subscribe that. You can also check it out on YouTube at the Brewtet. So you get bored, you want to listen to three guys talk about jazz and beer, then you're in the right place. This is gonna be a good one. So I'm gonna dive right into it, guys. Our first kind of topic is the idea of an origin story. I think so many artists talk about their origin story or are asked about their origin story, but I think not a lot of people dive into the tools that musicians use and how they arrive in those musicians' hands in the first place. And Jacob, I know this is something you and I kind of talked about a little bit recently. I just purchased a new horn, and I'll talk about that shortly. But you had mentioned a special set of drums that you had purchased or had been gifted. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're actually right behind me. I don't know if you can see there.
Yeah,
they're set up here. So that's a stop sign badge Gretsch kit. That was like the go-to kit for cats in the late 60s, I think, as early as the late 60s, but definitely in the 70s.
Yeah.
And that drum set was my high school drum set teacher's.
Oh, how cool.
And he's the first guy that really introduced me to jazz. He was a total mentor, not only as a drummer, but as just like a person. Like a real sage. In fact, I've been blessed to have both of my drum set teachers be like more than a musician teacher. They were both sages. So it was Frank Worrell in high school and Joe here in OSU in college. And I mean, both of them are like definitely Buddhist Zen kind of dudes. Definitely taught me about the spiritual side of music. Definitely taught me about how to get into the spiritual side of music as a player so that you perform better, and how to keep ego out of it. And I mean, they taught me so much, and it kind of blew my mind. Right after I graduated grad school, I actually took over for Frank in teaching his studio in Carborough, North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's where he taught for many, many, many years. And he decided at age 55 or something like that he'd always wanted to surf.
Yes!
And he was the kind of guy he was, right? He was the kind of guy that was if that was his thing, then he was going to go pursue it. And he kind of taught me that same kind of idea of passion and work towards it. So he was like, hey, I'm moving to California because I've been practicing here in North Carolina and I've been going to the beaches, but it's time to go to the big waves out in California. I'm leaving. Will you take over the studio? So I took over the studio, which was awesome and intimidating, but
oh yeah, no kidding.
Right time in my life. And then he spent almost a year out there, and then it didn't work out because it hurt his knees, and financially California was way expensive.
Ah,
and
go figure. Okay, go figure.
That was a blast. I'm still a surfer, but I need to come back to North Carolina. And that worked perfectly for me because I had just gotten engaged, and it was time for me to come back here and be with my bride-to-be. And his thing was hey, I'm cleaning out. I'm starting over again. And he was like, Jake, take my drums. So he just gave me the black Gretches.
He gave you the top line right there. He's like, here, I want you to have these.
Well, and it's, as we'll get into earlier, like it's not just that they're that kid,
right?
It's that he played on them, and that like his musicianship was in them, and all that kind of stuff. And it still kind of spooks me. Like if I'm not thinking about it, I sit down and play.
Right.
But if I'm thinking about it, or I go out and take them on a gig, it's like a little, like, oh
man,
I gotta step up to the plate more. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I totally can relate to that, and I think it's interesting too that you talked about your two mentors and your teachers. The first time I met Joe was at Music and Arts. I was doing, I think I was the rental temp the first round, and then a private lessons instructor the next round. And every time Joe would come in with his coffee cup, he was as chill as could be, just super. But like it was great because every time you saw a kid or an older kid go into a studio, they were never intimidated. It was this relaxed kind of feel where they could learn things. And I think it's really special to have teachers that are kind of at the point where they are amazing musicians, but they check that at the door and care about kids first. I think, and care about carrying on the tradition first. I think that's what's really, really important.
Joe was so good at like cracking jokes to just like let you drop all of the stuff that you bring into a lesson.
Yeah.
I'm in college. I got all this stuff in my head about I got to prove myself, and I was messing up all the time. So it was like a disaster psychologically, right?
Like every college kid.
Yeah, right. And he would just be so good at like sort of forcing me to drop all that stuff by just being who he was, by being funny, by being clever, by being egoless himself. And then that meant that the time we spent together working on music, we both sort of let that ego crap go, and it was beautiful.
It's a special connection. We'll talk more about that soon, I'm sure. Jay, talk to me a little bit about your horn setup, and are there any horns that are particularly special to you or origin story wise? I remember you telling me a story about I don't know if it was your alto or tenor, but you had gotten an ad in a newspaper for it, and you drove a while to, well, not a while, but you drove right then that day. You were like, I'm going to go get that. That's how it's going to get done. Carrie, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
You know what? I have a lot of, I'm sure Jacob has the same sort of thing. And I know Corey has a few different horns too, but it's like every horn, you kind of like, you grow, I don't know, you knowing this is kind of like knowing people, like knowing where they come from, knowing their background, the instrument's background kind of like ties you to them a little bit more, ties you into like the legend of that instrument a little bit.
Right.
And maybe it does affect your psyche a little bit. So the particular instrument you're talking about is my tenor. It's still the one that I've got. It's the only one I've ever purchased, actually.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of altos go through my hands, but that's my one and only tenor. And I just, I was like, I don't know. I think I was a freshman. It was like the summer after my freshman year of college. And I was just in love with Michael Brecker. I just had an ongoing love affair with Michael Brecker. I loved his playing.
As every saxophonist goes through that phase. Yes.
Right. And he was everywhere in those days too. He was on every pop recording. He was on every jazz recording. He was on every recording. So, I was brand new to the tenor. I'd only played tenor for a year, and I just had to have my own basically. And I read everything I could about Brecker, and I knew that he played on a Mark VI, and I was like, oh, here's one for sale. I was at home in the summer. I'm looking at the Detroit news, and it's like, oh, want ads or, classifieds. Here's one for sale in Plymouth. So I got into a car with a friend of mine. It was probably her car now that I'm thinking about it, because I didn't have one. So she probably drove me out to Plymouth. So, and it's not a short drive. So, and then I'm sure, and she sat there while I was like, I'm almost certain now that you're making me think of this, that it was Kathy Cavill, and she drove me out to Plymouth because she's a great friend.
Yeah. And
she had to sit there for an hour while I tried it out too. So good friend. So yeah, it's still the horn I've got, and I love it. I bought it from a kid who was a college student at U of M, and he wasn't playing it, and he knew the horn had value, so he sold it, and thank goodness I bought it, because that's been my one and only tenor. So I've played other ones like it, but that's the one I don't ever buy another one.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. Up until recently, I could say the same, Jay. But
up until recently, yeah.
But I have a few people to blame for that, and I've purchased a few saxophones in the past few years, and my wife still loves me, so that's good news. We're lucky there. That's good. But I one of the ones that I really love is my Barry sax, and I'll get into my tenor later. But the Barry that I purchased, actually from episode 2, the guy I talked to, Ben Baker, it was his saxophone, and I've been looking for this Barry sax forever. I wanted a 12M Con baritone saxophone. Didn't care what year necessarily. It would be fine if it was a later year. If it was a Mexican-made Con, it was fine. And I wanted it so bad, and I'll never forget, I was sitting in the parking lot at Capitol because I work with their cadet band. And I was sitting in their parking lot 20 minutes before rehearsal was supposed to start, so probably when I should have gotten out of the car and gone in and got warmed up with the kids and all that. And I, as saxophone junkies or as gear junkies, I'm sure, Jacob, you can relate to staring through pages of drum set stuff and cymbals and whatnot. And I'm scrolling through Craigslist, and lo and behold, here's this Con 12M baritone saxophone, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, that's the horn. That's the horn. And then when I found out it was kind of in my price range, I was like, well, okay, I'm going to pack my bags. Let's go tomorrow. I'm excited. And it didn't work out because the next day there was a giant snowstorm, and so I couldn't drive because it turns out it was all the way in Athens. And I love my wife, and she was like, are you sure you want to drive all the way to Athens to pick up a saxophone? And I was like, this is the one. We've waited forever for this.
You said we there. Are you sure?
You're right. She could probably attest to that was not the we, but you're right. You're right. And it was a great story because I got to meet this I say kid, but he's a college student and going into his last year. And I meet him, and I thought, I should probably bring someone because I'm always afraid to do transactions by myself, even though I look like a scary, intimidating guy. Those of you who know me know that I'm a giant teddy bear and could probably harm nobody. And so I asked my dad, and it's a great memory for me. My dad and I took a road trip down to Athens, Ohio together. We hadn't really hung out for road trips or anything like that in a long time, and he went with me, and we were able to get the saxophone. But that story from just the road trip is what makes that saxophone so special to me. When I play it, I think about him a lot because he was there to go with me to go get this. So I think it's really interesting, the origin stories behind our instruments and what they mean. So, I'm curious, do the stories themselves make your instrument special to you? I know, Jay, you were talking about getting into that a little bit about how, the story of driving in the Plymouth all the way to get the saxophone made that saxophone even more valuable to you because of what you went through to get it or the process. How is that instrument special to you? Are there concerts? Are there gigs? Are there things that really make that instrument something very special to you?
Well, for me, I look at it over the years that I've had it, it's gotten so ugly. And I just love it. It's all scabby, and all those scabs are mine because when I bought it, it was beautiful. It was in really, really nice shape, and it's not a particularly old one, so it was maybe 12 years old when I bought it.
Yeah. So
it was not that old, and it was really lightly used. So I look at the thing now, and I'm like, I love how scabby it is. It's awesome.
It's got
this. I don't know if you can see this, but this is my favorite. My favorite war wound right there is, I don't know, you can't see that, but there's a post right there that's worn.
Oh yeah.
Got a big flat mark on it from where my thumb has been rubbing on it for 30 years or something. I'm so proud of that.
That is awesome. That is awesome. As my great mentor used to say, Ryan Alexis would always say, it's character on your saxophone. It builds character.
Yeah. I didn't mean to say scabby, honey. I'm sorry.
Don't talk to her that way in front of the internet.
Take me back.
Jacob, you had talked briefly about, getting the weird feel when you're playing at gigs and things like that, the little edgy feel. What can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, okay, so to add to this origin story, so my teacher Frank, whose kit it was, I don't know if it was on this kit, but he was playing in the scene in North Carolina, and had a couple gigs with Miles Davis, which is wild.
Oh my God!
He also in the 70s went to this like creative music camp in Chicago. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but it was for like really out free jazz kind of stuff in Chicago in the summers, like for adult students and like a camp for adult students.
Yeah.
And the drum set professor the year he went was Jack DeJohnette, which is something. And to meet everybody the first day, he just told all the drummers to set their drums up in a circle.
Yeah.
And so there was like 20 drum sets set up in a circle. And Jack DeJohnette walked into the room, didn't say a word to anybody, and played on all the kits.
What?
As a way to like meet the players.
Oh my gosh.
And then when he finished on Frank's kit, that kit, he had never said anything to anybody else, but he turned around and he looked to Frank and he was like, "Yeah, little black Gretsch," and then walked away.
Oh my gosh.
So like that's like adds to the layer of intimidation.
What?
It's like it's not even that Frank played on it, like, which is awesome, and he's my teacher, and there's that connection. But
right,
Jack DeJohnette played it. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh!
To sit down and play on it is a little like like I can't live up to that, but I try.
Awesome.
It challenges me to do my best.
I'm sorry, I'm still blown away. Like that's insane, man. And it's easy to say when you're at gigs and things like that. At least part of this show this week is talking about how those things have presence in live music. Like that singular moment where he came by and played that kit, it still has presence in your performance today. I mean, I personally believe. I don't know. What do you guys think, Jacob? What's your say to that?
I'm a pretty we turn into worms in the ground kind of dude. In general, right. But I really do get into the spirituality of music, I think, and the connections between people and music, and because that's what it's all about, right? It's not just the music and it's not just the people, it's the connections that happen between them. And I think that what we're talking about and instruments sort of taking on this history and story, the sort of the soul of the instrument, I think it definitely operates. Right. It certainly operates on me psychologically. And I think, like speaking of my other drum set teacher, Joe Ong. So I was in college and I needed better cymbals because my cymbals were like the crap that you play on in high school and they didn't sound good.
Hey now.
And
that's all I have. Thanks a lot.
And I told him this, and Joe said, okay, but we're like college kids. He was like, so don't just go online and buy one really nice thing that's all pretty. He said, here's what you need to do, man. Go to the pawn shops, and don't go to the pawn shops in the nice neighborhoods. Are there pawn shops in nice neighborhoods? I don't know. He's like, go to the pawn shops in the not so good neighborhoods and go look for the old cymbals. And he said, just doing that will give you some soul.
Whoa.
But then you'll also find some,
like bullet holes.
Yeah. Yes, a little bit of that. But also, like, I'll find a cymbal that's got its own life, right? It's not a brand new cymbal that's just been pressed, but it's like a cymbal that's been played that's like worked more than I have. Right? Yeah. And so the cymbals that not all of them, but a lot of the cymbals I play on are actually like an old Zildjian from the 50s.
Oh my gosh.
A Zildjian from the 60s, another Zildjian from the 70s. And like they've been playing longer than I have.
Oh
so
my gosh.
they teach me.
Right.
When I go to try to swing on that cymbal, if I'm doing it right, I listen to the cymbal and the cymbal tells me I'm doing it right or wrong, or it guides me to make a better thing and sound, right?
What a cool point.
That is so interesting. That's the same thing I think of with instruments. Well, with not like your cymbals are not instruments.
There it is. Jay said it. Drummers don't count. That's it.
We also think about that as musical instruments. Right? Yeah. So, but it's the same thing. I think that, regardless of the saxophone, it's like some people that you find a way to make your body resonate the instrument. The instrument is the instrument.
Yeah.
Yes.
And your body, like, we have to take on a certain shape with our throat and, the voicing and the way we approach it with our air and stuff like that. We have to, and we make our body fit the instrument and resonate with the instrument. So it's like a partnership almost. So I feel the same way when I feel like everything's really clicking, I'm listening to my instrument. you know?
Yeah, and feeling
and I'm feeling it. And some instruments do that really, really well, and other ones I can't make my body align to it and bring it alive yet, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. You said that about a cymbal. That's really, really very interesting to me. You know?
I mean, I agree. I think it's insane to think, because my immediate mind is going straight to the drums themselves, right? You're talking about snare drum, toms, all that. When you think about cymbals, how cool is it that you play an instrument that different components of that instrument can come from different lives? Like, how cool is it that you get to play a full set that is composed of
elements,
different parts and different, that is blowing my mind right now. And I've never thought of drums that way, ever.
Yeah.
They're also a musical instrument, Corey. I don't know if you knew
Shut up! My coworker's never going to let me down for this ever again. Every time I go back to work, he's going to be like, hey, by the way, I still play an instrument, so shut up.
Just let you know.
It's interesting, Jay, because you're talking about how sometimes an instrument can click. And I experienced that when you and Pete called me.
Yeah.
So the story goes, I'm sitting at my desk doing some school stuff, and I get a text from Jay that says, hey, are you looking for a saxophone? And I thought better than to ask Abby if it was okay if I look at saxophones. But I said, well, I'm not really in the market, but what's going on? And you told me, well, Pete has a nice saxophone that he's looking to get to somebody. And so the story goes, I talked to Pete and all of that, and it turns out it's Brewtet Green saxophone, which just blows my mind. And I know, Jacob, you have a connection to Brewtet. But I've never felt so strongly attached to an instrument like I have on this one, because in the first 2 minutes of trying the sax out, everything worked. And it's not just like the mechanisms worked. It's that, like, I didn't have to work extra hard to make everything work. It just clicked perfectly. And I felt at that moment that I had some strange connection between the past owner of this horn and myself. And it's really something that sticks with me in my practice. And so I've always wanted to practice, but now I never stop practicing. Now it's sitting there ready for me to open and play, because it's this connection that I keep building. In the way that I can compare it to is relationships, right? So, Christian faith or whatnot is and I, for a long time, people on the internet who are watching, I wanted to be a youth pastor. Interesting, huh? Could you see this guy ever doing that again? No. But anyways, what's really, really interesting is that in Christian faith, you're always building a relationship with God. But that's how I feel about my instrument now. Every time I'm practicing, I'm building this relationship with this tool, and I think that is absolutely fantastic. All right, we have to take a very, very short break. We will be right back. No worries. We'll get right back into the origin stories and my favorite next segment, which is nicknames.
Hello.
Hello, Jay Miglia is back with us, ladies and gentlemen, and so is Jacob.
Responsibilities. Sorry.
We are back on the air, everybody. We are so excited to see you. Sorry for that very short break we had. We are so happy to be back and reunited with everybody. I like on here too, Chris, if you're still listening, Chris Lisi, yes, saxophones cost less than children. I would agree to that statement a lot. So, just like to put that out there.
If you want a good one.
If you want a good one. You're right. That's important, I guess, apparently. Guys, we were talking about, the origin story. And so, along with that, Jay, I want to pick your brain for a second. I know you're like, wait, what? Me?
The hair's down. There's a lot of access.
But, Jay, tell me, and this will truly refer to how much of a geek I am, nicknames. Is you got a good nickname there for the tenor you've got on your lap right now?
No.
I love it. This is great because go ahead.
I don't name them. I don't name my instruments. I know some people do, but I don't want to get too attached.
That's it. Because if it goes overboard, all of a sudden it's like you got to have a funeral for your instrument. That'd be terrible.
I call him Sir Leaks a lot right now because he's not leaking. He's leaking pretty badly. So,
according to our governor, apparently our economy and everything will be back up and running. So you can go get it fixed.
I'll be calling on Matt Adams.
There it is. Yes, Matt's gonna fix a few of mine too. That's very true. Jacob, what about you? You got any names for your instruments?
No.
This is my favorite because as I was planning the segment, I was banking on the fact that both of you would not have nicknames so that I could be the true weird nerd out here. The truth is, the best nickname by far came when I was in high school. I nicknamed my first tenor saxophone Jasmine.
Oh,
yep. And that's when I knew I should be a middle school band teacher.
How do I mute you?
Yes.
You wish. I have that control. No, I'm just kidding.
Jasmine.
Listen. I was 15, all right? Come on. What do you expect? 15-year-olds out there. Anyways, don't be watching the show if you're 15. Turn it off now.
Yeah, darn it.
But I think we were talking more and more about the connection that we have with our instruments and how it works. And before we left our break, I was talking about my connection with Brewtet's horn. And so it keeps adding every time because I find more and more deep stories about it. For example, I was talking to Matt Ellis the other day, which, by the way, love the man. He's doing great. He does great things for our kids in middle school. Thank you, Matt. But he was telling me how he would always call Brewtet for gigs, but he would always make Brewtet not play alto. He's like, play a horn that's not alto because he's lead alto, so you would think that that's the horn he would pick. And Matt was telling me stories about how he would always play that tenor. And just that story of knowing that this saxophone has been in those situations and being able to play it just means that much more. Like the monetary value of the instrument, when you find the instrument, it could be worth $100 or it could be worth $5 million. It doesn't matter because your connection to that instrument just far outweighs everything else. So I just think it's amazing to click with your instrument. So Jacob, I got to ask you, was it the first time you sat down? Was it the first gig? When did you know you were like, that's the instrument for the rest of my life?
He gave me the drums, and I wasn't going to say no. They're super sweet sounding drums.
That's very fair.
they're the kit that like everybody craves. Not everybody, but it's like a very classic setup.
Yeah.
For jazz drummers. And Gretsch has a long history of being a go-to brand for a lot of jazz guys. And so really it wasn't like, I played it and that decided that I like it. It was, he's giving me this. I have to live up to this.
Yeah.
I have to find a way to make them sound good, to develop that relationship. To be honest, I'm still very much working at it. If we're to open up a little bit about it, it's intimidated me so much that it was Frank and Jack DeJohnette that's played on those, and I have sort of my own confidence issues as a player.
Yeah.
That kit has stayed indoors and not out at gigs a lot more than it probably would in another musician's hands.
Yeah.
It took talking to Jim Rupp, the great Jim Rupp over at Columbus Pro Percussion. They always take care of me and any other drummers. I told him the story about it, and he was very kind and very encouraging. He was like, "Oh, that's amazing. You need to take those out. You need to play those, man. You can play those. It's okay. Go play those things." Like he encouraged me. So for me, it's not like it clicked, like I knew that's the one, but it's been more about developing the confidence to feel worthy. I feel like Wayne's World, which actually Frank, speaking of my drum set, Frank, drum set teacher Frank, he always quoted that because that was like out when I was
That's fantastic.
I'm not worthy. Right? I definitely feel like those guys when I'm playing those drums, and I have to. They sound super sweet. So
yeah, it's
true that there are moments when I play them that it clicks, and I'm like, oh, these sound amazing. I'm like you were saying, Jay, when like the vibe is flowing and you're doing the right thing and the drums sing. It definitely happens, but I think my psychology is a little bit messed up in terms of just the intimidation factor of the players who've played on it.
And if I had a horn that had that kind of a history tattooed on it, I don't know that I would be any different. Yeah. If I had an instrument that was famous, right, in my own hands, I don't know that I would feel any differently than you do. Yeah.
It's nice hearing other people say that. I don't feel as bad.
Get over it, snowflake.
Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, on Jay Insults Our Guests 101. I'm so happy you're here, Jay. So happy. No,
seriously, that's a big thing,
It is.
It's a big thing. You know what? You just reminded me of something. Joe Lovano played on this for a weekend.
What? Shut up.
At a festival one time. His horn didn't show up. It was middle of like nowhere, Oklahoma, and I had my horn because I was like part of this festival, and Lovano's horns didn't show up on the airplane. Anyway, long story, but so I had my horn, so I was like, Mr. Lovano, you can play my saxophone if you want to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so Lovano played this for the weekend. So, and I remember getting it back after he played on it, and I was like,
yeah.
I was a mess. I had the same like that phobia. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm about to play you. After what you've been through,
not worthy.
I'm sorry. You're gonna forget all about that Joe fella.
Yeah. I do.
Yeah, so I've actually experienced what you've experienced. So yeah, I dig it.
Corey, I do have a story like what you're talking about, clicking. So the snare drum with that kit is actually a snare drum I brought from Phil Shipley, principal percussionist of Columbus Symphony.
Oh, man.
Used to play with the Albany Symphony. Crazy dude, awesome dude, super kind. And the story's not about that, but it's about another piece of equipment I bought from him. In fact, I think it's because I went over to buy that snare. So Joe Ong knows Phil. They went to school together, I think, or at least they grew up a lot together. And so Joe knew that I was looking for some other stuff, and Phil called Joe anyway and was like, I'm clearing out my stuff. I want to sell it to your students before I like send it off on eBay and sell it to somebody who I don't know and don't care about and all that stuff, right? And I'll cut him a deal. I just want to get rid of the stuff and make sure it's in good hands. So I actually went over to Phil's house in London, Ohio. It's like this apartment thing, at least 3 times to pick stuff up throughout my college years. And I called him to see if he had a Gretsch snare, I think, to match this kit. And I went over. There's lots of stories from going over to hang out with Phil. This is Phil Shipley.
They're all PG. It's fine.
Yeah. But I will keep it to just this one. So I go over there, and I show up, and I'm like, all right, Phil, I want to check out the snare. He's like, no, don't worry about the snare. Come look at this. I'm like, no, Phil, I came to buy the snare, man. Like, where's the snare? He's like, no, don't worry about it. He brings me into his living room, which, I think this is the last time I was there. So he had been clearing out. He had tons of stuff. He had been clearing out. He had so much stuff that it was like filling up rooms.
Yeah.
But now it was all cleared out. And literally in his living room, there was like a sofa, a chair, and a hi-hat stand and a pair of hi-hats.
What?
There was nothing else in the room. It was insane. Maybe a lamp or something, but like there was literally like nothing in the room except for this hi-hat stand and a pair of hi-hats. He's like, you got to play these things, man. Jake, you got to play these things. You're going to want to buy these things the second time you play this. I was like, oh man, cool, but like I'm not in the market. I got the hi-hats, man. I got these nice whatevers. I want to buy this snare to go with the kit. He was like, fine, but play the hi-hats first. And he handed me the stick, and I did the thing, like the thing that we're all going to do to test out, because the thing you do the most often, right? You loose the hi-hat enough that it shushes a little,
yeah,
and then you hold it with your left hand, and you do, and you kind of open and close it with your fingers, like the thing that you would use the hi-hat the most for, besides just with your foot, right? To get the sound. How do I tell I want to do these? And I did it probably like for 2 measures. And then I stopped and I said, how much? Because these hi-hats sounded, when I did that on the hi-hats, I sounded like all the guys on all the records from the classic albums in the 50s.
Yeah.
And the reason is because they're Zildjian A's from the 50s.
Yeah. Oh my God.
They're the cymbals that those guys played. You know what I mean?
Man.
So, like, of course I wanted those, because that's exactly what I wanted to sound like. And he knew it, before I ever got there.
Oh.
Fantastic.
Man, he could have sold you anything.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know.
Well, okay, so on the topic of selling, I'm interested in this too. For me, it takes a special person to purchase an instrument that I want to sell. And that sounds stupid because, obviously everybody's dependent on what their reason for selling is. But for me, if I'm going to sell a horn that I've played, I got to find like the right person. And I'm interested. I don't know. Have you guys ever had a similar experience when you're trying to, sell an instrument that you've had? I don't know, Jay, you're shaking your head. Yes. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so does it need to be some, I know, right? Great radio space. Yes.
Yes.
But Jay, was it someone that was close to you? Was it a special situation for that person, or talk about it?
I've experienced that from both ends, as being the buyer and being the seller.
Yeah.
So, even really recently, like within the last half year, there was a guy in Columbus that was trying to sell his father's alto as a super balanced action alto.
Oh man.
And really, really nice instrument, like Paul Desmond used to play. And it was like number 1 of the series too. It was like the serial number was like 45001. It was like the very first one ever made. And it was really lovely. And part of the process of buying this instrument was I had to play for the guy. I had to play Take 5 because it was his dad's favorite song. And we had an interview process for me to buy this instrument.
Right.
So that's me experiencing it as a buyer. But and a similar thing too. I bought a King Super 20 one time, one of the nicest altos I've ever owned, from 1945, and it belonged to a guy who lived in Cambridge, Ohio, and used to he had a regional big band and stuff, a dance band. His son Bill is still with us and still playing. He's a drummer.
Yeah.
Bill Armstrong lives out in Cambridge still. Anyway, it was his dad's horn, and it was just so it had this. He was a big band player in the 40s and 50s, and then he got a Super 20, a Silver Sonic, so a new model, and he put this one away. So that had a horn. That horn had a ton of history already, living in it. And it was magnificent. And when I played it, I felt like I was Cannonball Adderley. I could sound like Cannonball Adderley on that instrument. I totally got where he was coming from. It blew like a tenor, but it was an alto. And it was just the sound was just gigantic. And the whole thing shook when I played it. It just resonated.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I sold that horn to a really deserving student too. And I sold it for way less money than it was worth. And because I mean, that's what really gets me about the Joe Long story too, about the drum set, Jacob. It's he just laid that on you. Or I'm sorry, that was Frank. That was
Frank, but yeah.
Gave you the drum set. That's just so incredibly generous. And what a generous guy. And he's your teacher. And my Mark 6 alto I got from my teacher, and he gave me a break on that. He sold it to me for way less than it was worth. So it's like I'm passing that on to this kid too. When I sold him that alto, I'm like, I've been the beneficiary from generous teachers, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm in a better situation than this kid is. So, and he needs this horn because he's awesome. So I sold him a really great horn for a really great price, and you know, it feels good to be able to pass it on. You know,
I think it's really funny that you were talking about having to play Take 5 and whatnot, but that's such a common story for everybody who's at least who I've talked to in purchasing.
I had to audition to buy the horn.
Right, exactly. I was on eBay one day. This was probably like 5 years ago, and I found this beautiful Reference 54. Which Jacob in saxophone world is like modeled off of the Mark VI, but it's a modern horn, so it gets all the benefits. Okay. And I saw it, and I was like, "Oh crap, man! She has it right now for $1,800. If I zip up to Akron, I can offer like twice as much cash right now, and we can do this." And however, I got it in my head, and I went on this trip, got in my car, and drove to Akron. Met this woman at some. It was her friend's like weird shop. It was a weird. I don't remember. Anyways. I met her at the shop, and
there was a monkey paw there.
You know, I'm not going to lie. There probably wasn't. But I started playing it, and she told me the story. It was her father's. He had passed away tragically, and they're trying to sell it to somebody who would like it. So I had asked, you know, what tune would you like to hear from this? And it was Girl from Ipanema, I think, is the one, which is, you know, a standard that everybody knows, and it's kind of cliche. And I played it for her, and at the end, she was just in tears. And I felt bad because the story didn't work out. I didn't have enough money to buy the saxophone, but I at least could play a song for her.
There you go.
For her,
made her cry.
For her father. That's right. That's what matters. Make people cry, apparently. But you know, talking about that on the modern, the horn I have now, the Mark VI that I have, that I've been so lucky to have from Brewtet's wife. In the contract of purchasing, there was an agreement that I would play her a tune once a month. So whatever tune she wanted, she would let me know and request it, and every month I'll play from that saxophone.
That's sweet.
But that's my way of saying, look, I'm only half of this instrument. This instrument has a whole other life that needs to be honored and needs to have a reason for it. But what about you, Jacob? Do you have any, experience with any of the instruments you've had in the past that you've maybe sold off or whatnot?
No, I don't think so. But I get it. I think that, there might be people who listen to this and be like, oh, it's a bunch of guys romanticizing their piece. They're objects. They're just objects.
Right.
It's but I think the people who understand and are touched by music and who get the power that music can have on people's lives, that if you understand that, then to understand how this stuff has such meaning is super easy, because it's a tool, but it's the tool that we use to do that, to make the music, and so the idea of cutting somebody a student a break because you're passing it on, or making sure it's a good fit for the right person, that they're going to honor and respect that instrument, which, like we're talking about, has had or will have a longer life than that musician possibly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We're honoring that. Right. And we have to, I think, I don't know that much about classical Indian music, but I know that there's this deep honoring of the instruments that happens in every performance prior to the performance and all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's what we're talking about here, right? Is honoring the instrument because of what, not only the effect it has for our audience if we play well and things like that, but the effect it has in our lives and what we're able to, learn and live through our music.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Right on. Yeah.
And as you're saying that, Jacob, with Eastern, instruments and whatnot, it also brings me to string instruments. God, some of those instruments that people are playing right now. I mean, think about how many different people they've been passed through to
the Guarneris and Stradivarius from the 1600s.
Right.
And just, yeah.
I can't imagine touching an instrument with that much history. That much history holds a lot of weight.
Yes. Yes.
With great power comes great. I love Spider-Man. It's a good comic. I think we're getting closer and closer to the heart of this discussion, which is souls, right? Like, human being souls or instrument souls. And it's interesting because when I was making this outline, I had formulated a question kind of, or a topic, which was, do you think that, I'm going to read this to make sure that I'm going to read the exact thing that I wrote down here.
I will drink while you read.
Please do. That's what half of the show is.
I'm a team player.
Right.
That's right.
Pause. But
this pause brought to you by Zaftig.
But I think it's crazy how you can identify instrument sounds. But Jacob, you brought up a good point. How, or I'm assuming maybe it's Jay. I don't know who wrote this in because that's the power with Google Docs. But how can some artists be immediately identifiable no matter what instrument they're playing? I love that question. Which one of you had that? I want to know.
That's Jay.
Oh, Jay. I guessed wrong. This is good. Jay.
But my tune of the choice this week ties completely into that. So
yes!
High five, Jay.
I have planned it perfectly.
Virtual high five.
So you set it up, Jay, and then I'll...
I love it. But Jay, go ahead. Talk about that.
It's a little bit of the opposite of what we're talking about, kind of.
Yeah.
I think to me, at least, I love what Jacob was just saying about like honoring the instruments and stuff like that. That's a big part of like the African drum tradition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in school, I played in an African drum ensemble because I thought it would help me with my time, and I think it did. There's certain things I can't feel, and I came to recognize that. So that's, that was always it was like a ritual. Like you always store the drums on their side because they have to rest, and it's like when you bring them, like you honor the instrument as you play it and as you set the thing in place to play it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you're done with it, you put it down and you're reverent toward that instrument.
Yes, it's a great word.
Just carrying the spirit of the tree, the spirit of the animal who made the head, who you got the head from. The carver, the person who made the drums, their spirit is in that, and you summon the spirit of ancestors when you play it.
Right.
Yeah.
So and all sorts of other. There's so much spirituality wrapped up in it. We don't necessarily carry those kind of things in like our European-based sort of tradition.
Right.
But yeah, this is like totally where we're But like what's interesting too is like when you brought up those those string instruments that are hundreds of years old. That's a different story. Right. I'm talking about we're talking about like modern kind of jazz instruments. Right. They're not even scratching 100 yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. If you're carrying around somebody's this was in the hands of Giuseppe Powdered Wig, from Antwerp in the 1750s. That's serious.
Yeah, man.
But you know what? But so I mean, I've kind of like flipped that idea, the idea of what we're talking about, like flipped it over, and it's like, how can people be immediately identifiable when they play any old instrument? They walk up to any instrument and they just sound like themselves. And that's like, I'm thinking, particularly, I think like in a modern context, I think about Chick Corea. I can pick Chick Corea out on any recording.
Right.
He has a touch, and it doesn't matter what he's playing or at what point in his life. It's Chick Corea.
That's Chick Corea. Yeah.
Man, what a crazy thought. I love it.
Charlie Parker played on a dozen different instruments, always sounded like himself. So sorry, I'm capitalizing on the conversation.
No, you're good.
Well, Keith Jarrett, you can always hear the gremlin in the background.
I'm Keith. That's how you know it's him.
Yeah.
This jazz history brought to you by Zaftig.
Yay!
No, I think it's very interesting the way you say that, and I know I've hinted in the past and the show about the book, The Music Lesson, by Victor Wooten. It really has just changed my entire approach to music. But in that, he's discovering the same thing. This fictional character that comes into his life and shows him the music and shows him instruments and everything. He's showing and demonstrating on every instrument the same concept. And it's still through the same mind of that same person. It's not this guitarist who's going to come in and play piano the way he'd approach guitar. He approaches music in one way and carries that to every instrument. And I think another person that is in this conversation may be cliche, and this ties into Tune of the Week. I'm excited about this, is John Coltrane. you know John Coltrane from the minute he starts playing, and I don't care.
Yeah, that's true.
Give him a different instrument. Give him something other than a saxophone, a clarinet, a soprano. Give him a trumpet, right? And assuming he had some ability to work around it, the way he approaches phrases and melodic ideas would be the same. I would argue would be the same as how he approaches music on the saxophone. It just so happens that he chose the saxophone or the saxophone chose him. And I mean, how cool would it be if we went back and took some of the coolest albums or the best albums and rearranged the people who were playing them to play a different instrument, but with the same approach, right? Let's just assume they had the ability to play those instruments, but think about it, How would Dave Brubeck play a trombone? I want to know. Right? I know it's a weird example, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
I think we're all curious.
I ruined the entire conversation. There it is.
Should I segue us to the next segment?
Please do. Jacob Reed, please.
So the tune I picked to share with you fits totally into what Jay's talking about, and I picked it because it's fascinating to hear what's going on. I'm a huge fan of Elvin Jones.
Yeah.
I never pick a favorite drummer because it's like hard, right? It's like picking a favorite beer. How can you pick your favorite?
You can't.
It's
not possible.
But Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, those guys, those are big time for me.
Yeah.
And so the album I picked is John Coltrane's Dear Old Stockholm. And on that album, it's Roy Haynes playing with the Coltrane Quartet.
Mm.
And what's fascinating is that you can definitely tell it's Roy Haynes.
It's not, yeah.
But you can also hear Roy Haynes, and I don't want to say it in a bad way, but you can kind of hear him trying to play like Elvin because he's playing in Elvin's seat. Like he's playing with those guys and playing those tunes. And so it's like, it's Roy Haynes. I mean, this guy played with Monk. This guy's played with everybody. Like he doesn't need to be Elvin Jones.
Right.
He can be Roy Haynes, but he's still like playing some Elvin Jones-ish stuff. And so I find it fascinating to listen to the whole album and just be like, is he more Roy? Is he more Elvin? Is he more like where does he land? Oh, he did that lick. Okay, that's Roy. Oh, he did this triplety thing. That's Elvin. And it's like it's just a really it's exactly what you're talking about, Jay. But in it's like a mess. It's like a mixture of the two.
I love that recording. I've had that recording for a long time, and I remember being really deep with that recording for quite a while.
Yeah,
that was Roy Haynes at a pretty young age too. It's like he was a kid.
Yeah.
So I could totally imagine him walking in and being like, "Oh man, I better sound like Elvin right now." Yeah. He's like in his teens or something like that. He's like 18, 19. I mean, he's young.
Yeah.
He's like just a kid, and he's like stepped into those shoes. That is an enormous recording. That's a great recording. I don't know if it's still in print, but man, that's one to get.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I wish that my technology and my ability to use technology would be able to play. I'm telling you, I've tried this 3 times now, Jacob.
I'll be happy to drink again while we wait.
Oh my God.
Don't go out of your way.
Well, for those of you who are listening on the podcast right now, as I'm talking, you'll hear the beautiful sounds of this recording. So as I'm talking right now, you'll be listening to exactly what he's talking about. And for those of you who are tuning in live on the internet, I am sorry. I would gladly accept any help through OBS software that you have to tell me how I can use that power. Jacob, it's interesting though. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I think is this like 63 or 4 or something like that.
That sounds right.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. I love that period of Coltrane. It's like it's not totally like he's not totally gone yet. Right.
Right.
He's still kind of playing tunes and playing changes, but he still gets free sometimes. And
he's pushing around the edges.
Yeah, that's like my favorite. That's the most interesting period for me, where it's like it's tied to the tradition, but it's also like pushing out into the future and stuff.
There was Columbia recordings of the Miles Davis Quintet, like I think 65 through 68.
Yep.
Are just like that for me too. It's kind of like where that group killed swing.
Right.
And like half the tunes there's still like swinging, and the other half the tunes it's like that like weird straight eighth thing that's not Latin but straight eighth. And Tony Williams is doing
Tony Williams' thing.
Yes. Right, his thing, but it's like in between, and there's times when like it's like some swinging stuff, and then there's times where you're like, what are they? Kind of like you can hear them. You can hear them breaking all the rules and breaking down the walls of like the normal playing into like out there.
Yeah. That's an incredible time. I totally agree with you. Miles is still playing all those tunes from his catalog, you know.
Yeah.
But they're just like, oh, let's go like this. How about you stop playing for a while and you play an ostinato and Tony, you just play 16th notes on your hi-hat for about 5 minutes. See what happens. You know, they're experimenting so much with all Miles' old stuff, you know. It's so cool when they're stretching what those tunes can be. It's awesome.
Man, I could talk to you guys for days. That's what I'm finding out right now. I need to get another beer. Time for another beer.
Free.
Right. With all the time we have, man. Before we finish off this segment, the other people that come to my mind is the Brewtet Quartet. When Desmond was no longer part of that, and forgive me, is it Joe Lovano who stepped in Desmond's place? Who stepped into Desmond's place?
Oh, there was an alto player, wasn't there?
Yes, and I'm forgetting his name.
It wasn't Joe. He's from Buffalo, New York.
It's not Lovano. It's Joe something. But
it was an Italian guy.
There it is. Yes. Okay.
Joe. I want to say Morello, but that was the drummer.
It is. No, I have no idea. Yeah, anyways,
drummer.
What I am speaking to is the recordings of his live playing, and it was interesting because he just slightly tried to follow Paul Desmond, but still did his own thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting to listen because, again, if you were listening to that same tune, if you're listening to Take 5, it's not the same Take 5 as Paul Desmond, and you can identify that almost immediately without even seeing who's playing it. And I think that is cool. They could be playing on the exact same horn, the exact same setup, and they're two different sounds because musicians, I think, connect to instruments that way. We can all be playing on the same setup, but we all still have just like our own individual fingerprints. We have our own sound, and we're always trying to find that sound. Sometimes we find the sound and we're not satisfied or think we're not satisfied. We change it, and then we're upset with ourselves for the next 5 years because we actually had the sound. And you can't escape the fact that you've lost the sound. But
they got away.
But that's the other one that came to my mind is that group and how it drastically kind of changed with him in the seat. Anywho, we are quickly approaching the end of the show, sadly, because this is just too much fun, I think. So we're gonna close it out here with our closing fifth segment, which is shout outs to things that are going on around us. It is crazy the world that we live in. It is crazy to be an educator. It is crazy to be a musician. It is crazy to be a human being in the world that we're living in right now. But it continuously amazes me to see the inventions that people are coming up with and ways to connect with each other and relate to one another. And I think it's very special. And that's what I think is so awesome about the show. Obviously, I would love to be playing live on Thursdays like we normally do, but it's great for me to expand my knowledge with my friends this way as well. So I thank you both for joining me today on this adventure. It was a lot of fun for me. So
yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Absolutely, guys. And this is the time of the show we like to shout out what's going on around us. So Jazz Arts Group, as always, we want to thank them for everything that they are doing with their podcasts that are bi-weekly Thursdays and Sundays. Zach Compson's doing a great job with that. Byron's doing a great job with that. I love it. If you have not checked it out, they're all amazing. So now you have a whole day of binging that you can go back and watch all that they've had, which I am thankful for. Just a quick shout out to the interwebs. We're excited to announce this. We can kind of announce it. The Brewtet is going to be performing for you in a matter of weeks. We'll have more information coming out to you on that, but we are planning on doing a live show for you one way or another. So we're going to have some fun with that. Jay, do you have anything coming up that you want to shout out or promote to?
I'll be grading tomorrow.
Yeah, congratulations on the end of the semester there, buddy.
It was hard fought, but here we are.
Hey, you know what? You'll be grading tomorrow.
I don't know about you guys. Man, you guys with your, this is a hard road. This online thing, like transitioning like overnight to online.
It is.
I don't know, man. You guys are my heroes. I don't know how you did it.
You're right there with us.
It's hard.
What you don't know,
have a million more students than I have, though. So I mean, I don't know how you did it.
What you don't know is that Jacob and I call each other almost daily, breaking down with anxiety attacks. It's great.
I can confirm that.
And by both of us, I mean that I am breaking down constantly in anxiety attacks, and Jacob's like, "It's gonna be okay."
I've called you for plenty of my own worries.
But Jay, we're so thankful that you're here with us each week, and I'm very excited to have you throughout the rest of the month of May. And for those who don't know, Jay graduated with his social studies teaching certificate, which is pretty stinking exciting. So cool. I can't wait to see you explore that avenue when the world comes back to norm. That would be great. But our other guest here, Jacob, I am so incredibly excited that you were here with me tonight. This topic has been something you and I have talked about a lot, and I'm very happy to have you here. Do you have anything coming up? Anything you want to plug? Other than grading? Because I know we both have that too.
Yeah, I don't have anything anytime soon.
Right.
Once things open up.
Well,
maybe.
I can say that I sincerely hope that you can get back to doing some Noctera stuff, because that was really cool to see you bring in people and work there and play, especially in POW, which I think is a cool community to kind of cultivate that type of vibe. So I don't know if they're listening, but if you're listening, Noctera, when we get back,
we'd love to be back.
We want the Jacob Reed trio.
Very good vibe there. And we were going to have Jay.
That's
Jay
right.
was scheduled.
That's right.
I forget when you were scheduled. Your schedule must have been March or April.
It was just a couple weeks ago. Just a couple weeks ago. So,
we were
missed it.
Have Jay.
Missed it. Missed it.
Well, that's almost it for us. Next week, we are excited. We have the great Zach Compston with us talking about jazz education, and now specifically to the internet, jazz education in the collegiate level. Jay, I'm excited to have you there for that as well. For those of you who don't know, Zach Compston officially teaching the big band there at Capital University now next year. Huge news. That's super exciting that he shared today, so I'm pumped about that. From all of us at the Brews and Tunes podcast, meaning Jacob Reed and Jay Miglia tonight, we are so thankful, everybody. Have an amazing evening. Thank you for joining us. As always, if you have questions or thoughts on what you can add to the show, please email us at thebrewtet@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I love you. Have an amazing night. Stay healthy. Don't go crazy in your houses.